I never thought I would be sitting here telling this story. 3 months ago, I married Amanda, the woman I believed was my soulmate. Our romance had been a whirlwind of happiness and dreams for the future. The wedding was everything we hoped for, surrounded by family and friends, celebrating our love. But recently, strange text messages started appearing on her phone. Messages from Jason, her ex. Something felt off, but I tried to ignore it. Before I tell you how my 3-month marriage crumbled overnight, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. If this story resonates with you, consider subscribing as I share my journey of rebuilding after betrayal. My name is Bryce, and at 32 years old, I thought I had finally found the person I would spend the rest of my life with. I work as a software developer in Seattle, where the tech industry keeps everyone busy and the coffee keeps everyone awake. It was at my friend Taylor's birthday party where I first saw Amanda. She stood across the room laughing with some friends, her dark hair falling over her shoulders. There was something magnetic about her presence that made it impossible not to notice her. When our mutual friend introduced us, I immediately felt a connection. We talked about everything from our favorite hiking trails around Washington to obscure sci-fi shows nobody else seemed to watch. By the end of the night, we had exchanged numbers, and I found myself texting her the very next day to set up our first date. I took her to a local restaurant known for its amazing seafood. She wore a blue dress that matched her eyes, and I remember thinking how lucky I was to be sitting across from her. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, without any awkward silences that typically plague first dates. We shared stories about our childhoods, our careers, and our dreams. When I walked her to her car that night, the kiss we shared confirmed what I already suspected. This was the beginning of something special. The 6 months that followed were the happiest of my life. Amanda was everything I had been looking for. She was intelligent with a sharp sense of humor that kept me laughing. She worked as a marketing executive for a local company, and her ambition matched my own. We both enjoyed outdoor activities, trying new restaurants and quiet nights and watching movies. There had been relationships before Amanda, but none that made me feel so certain about the future. With her, I could easily imagine building a life together. We talked about buying a house in the suburbs someday, traveling to Europe, and maybe even starting a family down the road. She mentioned previous relationships, including one with a guy named Jason that had lasted nearly 3 years. But those conversations were always brief. The past was the past, and we were focused on our future together. After 6 months of dating, I knew without a doubt that Amanda was the one. I spent weeks planning the perfect proposal. I chose a scenic spot overlooking the water at sunset, arranged for her favorite flowers to be waiting, and even had a photographer hiding nearby to capture the moment. When I got down on one knee and asked her to marry me, her eyes filled with tears as she said yes. The image of her face in that moment, illuminated by the setting sun as she slipped on the ring, is one I will never forget, even after everything that happened later. Our wedding took place the following spring. It was a beautiful ceremony with around 150 guests. Amanda looked stunning in her white dress as she walked down the aisle toward me. Throughout the day, she was radiant, smiling and laughing as we celebrated with friends and family. She kissed me with such passion during the ceremony that our guests cheered. Every loving glance and touch reinforced my belief that we were starting something wonderful together. After the honeymoon, we moved into our apartment in a trendy neighborhood in Seattle. The first 2 months of marriage were everything I had hoped for. We settled into comfortable routines, cooking dinner together, planning weekend trips, and talking about our day while curled up on the couch. I felt complete trust in our relationship and was happier than I had ever been. We were building our life brick by brick, and the foundation seemed unshakable. But then, things began to change. At first, the shifts were so subtle I barely noticed them. Amanda became increasingly attached to her phone, smiling at messages that she would quickly hide when I entered the room. She started working late more often, explaining that a big project needed her attention. I believed her without question because that is what trust in a marriage means. 3 months into our marriage, Amanda told me about a work event that would keep her out late. When she came home after midnight, something felt different. Her explanation about the event seemed rehearsed, lacking the usual details she would share about her colleagues or the venue. When I hugged her, I noticed an unfamiliar scent that definitely was not her usual perfume. Our intimate life began to change, too. The passionate connection we had enjoyed since our first date started to fade. She would claim fatigue or stress from work when I initiated. There were times I would walk into our living room and find her stepping outside to take phone calls, which immediately stopped when I appeared. The first time she casually mentioned Jason, her ex, I felt a strange twist in my gut. We were discussing an upcoming concert when she said Jason once took me to see them years ago. The band was much better back then. The comment seemed innocent enough, but something in her tone when she said his name caught my attention. Our first serious argument came when I gently asked about her increasingly secretive behavior. Instead of reassurance, I received defensiveness. She accused me of being controlling and paranoid. I apologized, not wanting to upset her, and tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. After all, marriage required trust, and I wanted to give her the benefit of every doubt. As weeks passed, the occasional girls' night out became a regular weekend occurrence. Amanda changed the passwords on her phone and laptop, claiming it was a new security policy at work. She sometimes came home with new jewelry or clothes that she was vague about purchasing. More than once I noticed the distinct scent of cologne on her clothes when sorting laundry. Her interest in our future plans diminished noticeably. When I brought up the house we had talked about buying, she would change the subject or say we should wait a few more years. I spent more nights lying awake beside her, watching her sleep, and wondering what was happening to us. The anxiety began affecting my work performance and my overall well-being. My friend Taylor noticed the change in Amanda, too. During a guy's night out, he carefully mentioned that Amanda seemed different at the last group dinner, constantly checking her phone and stepping away for calls. Hearing this from someone else confirmed that I was not imagining things. Something was definitely wrong. The moral dilemma of invading her privacy tormented me for days. I had always believed that relationships should be built on trust, not surveillance. But the growing mountain of red flags became impossible to ignore. When Amanda left her credit card statement on the kitchen counter, I found myself looking at charges for dinners at romantic restaurants on nights she had claimed to be working late or with girlfriends. The evidence was always for two people, never a group. One night while Amanda slept, I checked her phone location history, something I never thought I would do. It showed regular visits to an upscale apartment complex across town, a location she had never mentioned to me. When I asked her casually about that area of town the next day, she became irritable, asking why I was interrogating her. This pattern continued with each gentle inquiry. She would deflect, become angry, or turn the situation around to make me feel guilty for asking. Amanda became skilled at making me doubt my own perceptions. She would insist that she had told me about plans that I had no memory of her mentioning. She would say I was being irrational when I expressed concern about our growing distance. I began to wonder if I was the problem, if my insecurities were damaging our marriage. I consulted my friend Mark, who had been married for 10 years. He advised caution, suggesting that there might be innocent explanations and that jumping to conclusions could create irreparable damage. I wanted to believe him, so I decided to focus on strengthening our relationship rather than investigating my suspicions. I planned a romantic weekend getaway to the mountain lodge, where we had spent a magical weekend during our dating days. When I told Amanda about it, her reaction was lukewarm at best. 2 days before we were scheduled to leave, she canceled, claiming an emergency work presentation had come up. I offered to help her prepare so we could still make our trip, but she insisted it was impossible. That night I attempted an honest conversation about the state of our marriage. I expressed how much I loved her and how I felt we were drifting apart. I asked if there was anything I could do differently, anything she needed from me. Instead of engaging, she shut down. The discussion accused me of being needy and went to bed early. The next day I suggested marriage counseling. Her reaction was immediate anger. "We do not need a stranger telling us how to run our marriage," she snapped. "This is all in your head, Bryce. You need to trust me more." I tried to believe her explanations. I wanted so badly for everything to be fine, for my suspicions to be unfounded. A week later, while cleaning out her car before taking it for maintenance, I found a receipt from a downtown hotel dated during her supposed girls' night out. My heart sank, but I still held on to hope that there might be an explanation I had not considered. The confirmation I had been dreading came from an unexpected source. My coworker Ryan stopped by my desk one afternoon looking uncomfortable. After some hesitation, he revealed that he had seen Amanda at a restaurant the previous weekend with a man who was definitely not me. They had been holding hands across the table, and the interaction was clearly romantic. The description he gave of the man matched photos I had seen of Jason on social media before Amanda deleted them after our engagement. The revelation left me devastated but still searching for explanations. I reached out to our mutual friend Sarah, who had known Amanda longer than I had. After some reluctance, Sarah confirmed my worst fears. She had seen Amanda with Jason multiple times over the past month, but had been unsure how to tell me. According to Sarah, they looked very much like a couple. Despite this confirmation, I felt I needed definitive proof before confronting Amanda. I needed to see with my own eyes what was happening. The emotional toll of maintaining a normal facade while carrying this knowledge was immense. Each kiss goodbye in the morning. Each routine. How was your day? Conversation felt like a performance in a tragic play, where I was the only one who did not know the ending. The moment of truth arrived when Amanda announced she would be attending a business conference over the weekend. Instead of going home after work that Friday, I followed her at a distance. My hands shook on the steering wheel as I watched her car pull into the parking lot of an upscale restaurant downtown. She was not heading out of town as she had claimed. 20 minutes later, a tall man with dark hair approached her table. Jason. I recognized him immediately from the few photos I had seen before they disappeared from social media. From my parked car across the street, I watched through the restaurant window as they greeted each other with comfortable familiarity. The way she touched his arm, the intimate smiles they exchanged left no room for innocent explanations. They spent nearly 2 hours at dinner, during which Amanda laughed more genuinely than she had with me in months. When they left, I followed at a safe distance as they drove to a boutique hotel. I watched them check in together, saw them kiss in the elevator, all while feeling physically ill. With shaking hands, I took photos as evidence, each click of my phone camera feeling like another crack in my heart. I drove home alone, my mind racing with questions and realizations. How long had this been happening? Was our entire relationship a lie? The apartment felt empty and cold as I sat in the dark waiting and processing. Sleep was impossible as I prepared myself for the confrontation that would end my marriage. Amanda returned late Sunday evening, bringing the fake cheerfulness that had become her trademark. She spoke animatedly about the conference sessions and networking opportunities. I sat quietly on the couch, letting her fabricate an entire weekend of professional development. When she finished her elaborate story, I simply asked, "Can we talk about where you really were this weekend?" Her expression shifted almost imperceptibly, but she maintained her composure. "What do you mean I told you I was at the marketing conference in Portland?" I took a deep breath and placed my phone on the coffee table between us, screen up, showing a photo of her and Jason entering the hotel. "No, you were with Jason at the Hartwell Hotel downtown. I saw you." The shock on her face quickly transformed into defensive anger. "You followed me. You spied on me. What kind of husband is that?" "The kind whose wife has been lying to him," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "How long has this been going on, Amanda?" After several minutes of denial and deflection, she finally broke down. Yes, she had been seeing Jason. Yes, it was an affair. According to her, it had begun just 2 weeks after our wedding when they ran into each other at a coffee shop. She claimed I had been neglecting her, too focused on work. She said Jason understood her in ways I never could. "We have a history," she said, as if that justified everything. There were unresolved feelings that just came rushing back. Our argument escalated until neighbors could surely hear. Amanda cycled through various emotional states: defensive, anger, tearful remorse, cold detachment, and back again. She justified her actions by claiming our marriage had problems from the beginning. Problems I had somehow failed to notice or address. It was mostly just physical, she eventually said, as if that would somehow lessen the betrayal. It did not mean anything. But of course it meant everything. It meant the end of trust, the end of our marriage, the end of the future we had planned together. I packed an overnight bag, while Amanda followed me around the apartment, her strategy shifting to desperate pleas for forgiveness. She promised to end things with Jason, to attend counseling, to do whatever it took to save our marriage. But with each promise, I only felt more certain that there was nothing left to save. I spent the night in a hotel downtown not far from where my wife had betrayed me with her ex. I barely slept, my mind replaying every moment of our relationship, searching for signs I had missed, wondering how I could have been so blind. By morning I had clarity. I knew exactly what I needed to do. When I returned to our apartment the next day, Amanda was gone. A note on the kitchen counter explained she was staying with a friend to give me space to think. Space was exactly what I needed, but on a much larger scale than she imagined. The decision came with surprising certainty. I called my boss and requested an immediate transfer to our Denver office, explaining my personal situation in just enough detail to convey the urgency. To his credit, he approved it without hesitation. I spent the day researching apartments in Denver and packing only what I needed. Furniture, appliances, most of my clothes all became suddenly meaningless. I took only what fit in my car clothes. Important documents, a few sentimental items from before Amanda, and my laptop. Before leaving, I wrote her a letter explaining my decision. I told her that trust once broken so completely could not be repaired. I wished her well, but made it clear that our marriage was over. I placed my wedding ring and house key on top of the letter on the kitchen table and walked out without looking back. The drive to Denver was 14 hours of processing grief, anger, and eventually a strange sense of liberation. I ignored the barrage of calls and texts from Amanda, which began shortly after she presumably returned home to find me gone. Each mile put distance between me and the betrayal, creating space for me to breathe again. I checked into an extended stay hotel that would serve as my temporary home while I looked for something permanent. The first week passed in a blur of emotional numbness. I went through the motions of starting at the Denver office, introducing myself to new colleagues and learning new systems. The work provided a welcome distraction from the constant thoughts of Amanda and what had happened. Slowly, a routine emerged. Morning runs along Denver's trails, work during the day, take out dinner while searching for apartments in the evening, sleep, repeat. The simplicity was comforting after the emotional chaos I had left behind. Amanda continued her attempts to reach me, creating new email addresses and using different phone numbers when I blocked her original ones. I read none of the emails and answered none of the calls. Whatever she had to say could not change what had happened, and I had no interest in prolonging the pain. After 3 weeks, I found a one-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood. Furnishing it with just the basics gave me an unexpected sense of starting fresh. Each item I purchased represented a choice that was entirely mine, unburdened by compromise or consideration for anyone else. At work, I threw myself into projects with intense focus. My new colleagues seemed to appreciate my dedication, unaware that it was partly an attempt to keep painful thoughts at bay. Gradually, I began accepting invitations to team lunches and happy hours. I joined a local hiking group that met on weekends. Each small social interaction helped rebuild my sense of normalcy. I found a therapist specializing in betrayal trauma who helped me process my anger in healthier ways. Instead of directing it all at Amanda or myself, I channeled it into morning runs that grew longer and more challenging. The physical exertion helped clear my mind and strengthen my body when my spirit felt weakest. Through mutual friends, I learned that Amanda was telling people I had abandoned her without explanation, painting herself as the victim. She had reached out to several friends asking for information about me, but those who knew the truth maintained my privacy. Taylor, who had witnessed the decline of our relationship firsthand, became an unexpected source of support, checking in regularly, despite the distance. The first holidays alone were difficult, but not as unbearable as I had anticipated. I accepted an invitation from a new coworker to join their family for Thanksgiving, where no one knew my story or felt sorry for me. By Christmas, I felt comfortable enough to decline invitations and spend the day hiking in the mountains alone. The solitude that once would have seemed lonely now felt peaceful. I filed for divorce without ever returning to Seattle, working through attorneys to complete the process. Amanda contested at first, but eventually agreed to the terms when it became clear I would not change my mind. 3 months after I left the office, receptionist called to say a woman claiming to be my wife was insisting on seeing me. Amanda had somehow tracked down my workplace and flown to Denver. I asked security to escort me to the lobby where Amanda stood, with tears streaming down her face. "You just disappeared," she said, when she saw me. "How could you just leave without talking to me?" Without giving us a chance to fix things, I suggested we talk privately, not wanting to create a scene in front of my new colleagues. In a coffee shop across the street, Amanda cycled through tears, accusations, and pleas. She revealed that Jason had ended things with her just 2 months after I left, claiming he had never wanted anything serious. "It was a terrible mistake," she said, reaching for my hand across the table. "I never stopped loving you. We can start over. I will move here. We can go to counseling. Whatever you want." Looking at her, I felt a strange detachment, as if I were observing a scene in a movie rather than my own life. The woman I had once loved so completely now seemed like a stranger. I told her calmly but firmly that there was no chance of reconciliation. The marriage was over. I had moved on. Her response was not what I expected. Her tears turned to anger as she accused me of being cruel and unforgiving. When she began raising her voice, attracting attention from other customers, I ended the conversation. As I walked back to my office, she followed, continuing her emotional outburst in the lobby until security intervened. Watching her being escorted out, I felt a surprising sense of closure. I had stood my ground, maintained my boundaries, and discovered my own strength in the process. The following 6 months brought unexpected positive changes. My focused work ethic earned me a promotion. My apartment began to feel like home. My circle of friends grew slowly but steadily, and perhaps most surprisingly, I developed a friendship with Lauren, a software engineer who had joined the company shortly after I did. Our relationship remained purely platonic at first, built on shared professional interests and a mutual love of hiking. Lauren knew nothing of my past until months into our friendship, when I finally felt comfortable sharing my story over dinner one night. Her response was compassionate, without being pitying, and our friendship deepened. The divorce was finalized 7 months after I left Seattle. I signed the papers without regret or hesitation. By then, Amanda had stopped attempting to contact me, finally accepting that her actions had permanently ended our relationship. That summer, I took a week-long hiking trip in the mountains. Standing on a summit overlooking a vast landscape of peaks and valleys, I experienced something I had not felt in more than a year: genuine happiness, untainted by grief or anger. The realization brought tears to my eyes. I had survived. More than that, I was beginning to thrive. As the first anniversary of my departure from Seattle approached, I found myself reflecting on the journey. The pain that once seemed unbearable had transformed into wisdom. I felt grateful that I had discovered the betrayal early in our marriage rather than years later. I was thankful for having had the courage to leave rather than accepting a relationship built on lies. I recognized the warning signs I had ignored: the secrecy, the defensiveness, the subtle distancing. These lessons would serve me well in future relationships, helping me establish healthier boundaries and expectations. My friendship with Lauren had begun showing signs of developing into something more. We had shared a kiss after a company holiday party, but both agreed to move forward slowly. There was no rush. Trust takes time to build, and I was no longer willing to shortcut that process. Looking back now, I have no regrets about my decision to leave town and never return. Walking away was not an act of cowardice, but an act of self-preservation. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is remove yourself from a situation that diminishes your spirit and undermines your self-worth. If you have ever faced betrayal or had to make the difficult decision to walk away from someone you loved, share your experience in the comments below. How did you find the strength to move forward? If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who might need to hear that there is life and happiness after betrayal. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember that your self-respect is always worth more than a relationship that requires you to compromise it. Your healing might begin with one brave step in a new direction.